You know, after that, if I had any sense, I'd just say amen. Thank you, Congressman Butterfield. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your service. And thank you for supporting Hillary. I want to thank the students who were part of the pre-program, Heidi Paero, who led this Pledge of Allegiance, and Brianna Williams, who sang the national anthem. I want to thank Mayor Bill Bell. I remember when he first ran for mayor. And I want to thank him for being mayor and for being a good one. Thank you, Senator Floyd McKissick. Thank you, Senator Mike Woodard. Thank you, Representative Larry Hall, Secretary of State Elaine Marshall. I want to thank the people here at West End Community Foundation. This Community Family Life and Recreation Center is an amazing thing, and I'm going to come back to it. But thank you, Marie Shaw Simmons, the Vice Chair of the Board, and Rebecca Oates, the Director of the Center. Think about this center. I was just next door taking pictures with the young people who come here every day after school. And they all wrote me notes. And they were bright-eyed, and they wanted to shake hands, and it was amazing. And then I asked, I said, how'd you finance this? How you pay for this after-school program? Now, I want you all to follow this, because it's what this election's all about. They said, we finance this through the rents we get from the other tenants in this school that has been recovered. So I said, how did you renovate the school? I said, well, the city floated a $6 million bond. If I make a mistake, correct me. And we renovated the school. And so we got all these people that have offices here that do various good things. And with the money we get from the rents, we can afford to offer this after-school program. And it's changed the neighborhood. We got better housing. We have lower crime. We have more opportunity. Now, why am I telling you this? A couple of weeks ago, I celebrated my 70th birthday. I still can't believe it. Which must, to all the young people here, they're probably wondering why I'm not wrapped like a mummy or something. For half of those 70 years, I have spent most of my time 12 years as a governor, 8 years as your president, 15 years running my foundation. I spent most of my time trying to find jobs for people, help them start businesses, or educate and train people so they could do that for themselves. Trying to go into places that felt left out and left behind and make something good happen. And the story of this community center is what works. Wherever people get together, public sector, private sector, education, they think, okay, here's a problem, this empty school. I see an opportunity. How are we going to seize the opportunity? How are we going to seize this opportunity? Well, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing. Wherever in this world people are working together to make something good happen, good things are happening. Wherever in the world people think all that matters is their differences, their racial differences, their gender difference, their religious difference, their sexual orientation. Everywhere the difference is all that matters. Some people may win a few elections, but good things don't happen. North Carolina at its best represents the future of America, and I hope the entire world, by embracing your diversity. And it works. The problem is, look how long it took me to tell you this. We live in a Snapchat, Twitter world when it's so much easier just to discredit people and call them names and try to get people to stop thinking. It's a terrible mistake. I spent half my lifetime doing this work. I got tickled the other day when Mr. Trump called my foundation a criminal enterprise. That was pretty funny considering that the three major evaluators of foundations gave it the highest grade they can give. And the most recent one, graded it even higher than the Red Cross. And considering, unlike him, we actually say who gives us money and what we spend it on. And disclose our tax returns and things like that. And considering his foundation was recently fined by the government for actually paying out of the foundation. If you put money in a family foundation, you don't pay taxes on it because you're going to give it away, right? But you can't make a political contribution. He made a political contribution to the Attorney General of Florida, who at the time had her office investigating Trump University. And mysteriously, the investigation vanished. Same sort of thing that Judge was doing in the middle of the country when he released all the facts on how it worked. And you remember what Donald Trump said? Well, he can't be fair to me. He's Hispanic. Now, I'm just telling you, everybody's looking for slogans and labels. Real life is hard work. Real change is hard work. And if you look in the eyes of these kids, it's worth it. Real improvement in school sometimes takes a decade, but what works is making the teachers better teachers, the principals better principals, and making better use of the community and the parents to get them into school. It's hard work. So here's what I want to say. I know this has been a crazy election. You would admit that, wouldn't you? There's a reason for that. In the last 8 years since the financial crash occurred 8 years ago this month, if you adjust for inflation, 80% of the American people have not yet had a pay raise, even though we've had the longest continuous period of economic expansion since the end of World War II. We have episodic, vicious, heartbreaking acts of terror. We have people scared to walk the streets, and we got people scared to patrol the streets. We have, in Europe, the largest refugee crisis since World War II. And we have all these cultural changes going on at once, as exemplified by the unbelievable weird fights you had in North Carolina over bathroom use. Now we're laughing, but that's why this election turns out to be whether we're stronger together or we're stronger apart. Whether we should build bridges to each other and the rest of the world or put up walls. Why most people my age, or a lot of them anyway, are saying, man, I can't handle all this change at once. I want to go inside, close the door, and hope I wake up and things will be simple the way they used to be. The greatest Democratic humorist in history was Will Rogers, who was naturally hilarious. He was a cowboy from Oklahoma who was the best rope trick artist of his day. He said famously, I don't belong to an organized political party, I'm a Democrat. But then he said, don't tell me about the good old days, they never were us. When somebody promises you to make America great again, if you're my age and you celebrated North Carolina's victory in the voting rights case, you know, I want all the young people listen to me, you know what make America great again it means. It means I'll give you the economy we had 50 years ago, and I'll move you back up on the social totem pole and push somebody else back down. I've been living with this all my life. I hope I will be the last American president who can ever say, though it's a good political story, that when I was a child I spent some time on a small farm that didn't have indoor plumbing. You go, ooh. Don't. In the wintertime, the outhouse is way overrated. But why am I telling you this? Because we need to live in the future and not the past. America is the best positioned country in the world for the future. All the wonderful things that have happened in North Carolina, why have they happened? Because there are places all over this state which are inclusive and welcoming of people without regard to their differences. And because they understand that America's greatest asset compared to all other countries in the world is our youth and diversity. And so that's what the election's about. We need some things. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think 10 years from now, people will look back on this period in which President Obama served and give him more credit than they do today for managing this economy that people plan on doing. That's what I believe. But it had a long, long tail, that recession 8 years ago. There are too many people who hadn't had a pay raise. And that makes a lot of road rage. It's terrible for people to get up every morning. A lot of your families have people like that who look in the mirror when they get up in the morning and they think, every one of my tomorrows is going to be just like yesterday. It's devastating. So, the question is, what are you going to do about it? What we need is faster, more fairly shared growth. The reason you ought to be for Hillary is because of how it'll affect you, not who's winning the evening news battles. The way to do that is to create more and better jobs and to make sure the incomes are fairly shared. The way to do that is to invest in a truly modern infrastructure program that is more roads, bridges, ports, and airports, and rails, yes, but also cleaning up all these water systems. Flint, Michigan's not the only place where kids have elevated lead levels in their blood. And second, rural North Carolina still has some places where people don't have access to rapid, affordable broadband. There are 5 million children who go to school in your country every day and get homework assignments that require them to get on the internet, and they cannot do it. That's wrong. So she wants to do that. If we do it right, it'll create 10 million jobs, maybe more. Second, she was the first candidate, and so far the only one left, who actually had a serious, specific plan to get banks to increase lending to small businesses. Now, this is a legitimate issue. I like the Dodd-Frank bill that President Obama signed because it keeps Wall Street from wrecking Main Street again. But what happened is all the banks got gun shy and essentially started applying the rules to every kind of loan. So if you go down to a local bank and say, I'd like to borrow $60,000 to open a bakery. Always dreamed of it. First of all, if you don't have any real estate today, you probably don't have collateral and they won't give it to you. Second, if you got student debt, they won't give it to you. But thirdly, if it costs the bank as much to make a $60,000 loan as it does to make a $6 million loan, they're not going to be nearly as many $60,000 loans. Hillary proposed to do something about that in the first week she was a candidate, more than a year ago, and has continued to talk about it. Thirdly, this is important. She has a plan to promote fair trade and manufacturing that has been endorsed in Ohio, a battleground state, by the chairman of the House Manufacturing Caucus, Tim Ryan of Ohio, and Senator Sherrod Brown, who knows more about it than anybody in the Senate. And finally, and most important, she also was the very first person, and is now the only person you can vote for, who said we're going to have to do more to give extra incentives to get people to invest in areas that are left out and left behind. Not just the places that vote for Democrats, but the places that vote for Republicans. It ought to be determined by social misery and economic deprivation. Every place. And from coal country to Indian country to urban neighborhoods that have been left out and left behind to small towns and rural areas. We all know we got a terrible drug problem in America, right? Prescription drugs and heroin, fentanyl now being made in labs in America. This is the first drug epidemic in my lifetime where the addiction rates are higher in small town and rural America than they are in urban areas, because that's where the most economic and social desperation is today. We got to get out of this together. It's a terrible drag on our economy if places can't grow. So is too much inequality. If 90% of the gains go to 1% of the people, and the economy depends on 70% on consumer spending, what the heck are consumers going to spend? This inequality is bad. So Hillary says we ought to give big corporations real tax breaks if they train their people for higher jobs and they share their profits with them. But they ought to have to pay if they want to move overseas. They ought to have to pay if they want to put their headquarters overseas so they don't pay taxes, because they've already given the vast majority of the gains to the leaders and the shareholders. Not because she resents success. We've been very fortunate. But we've also, unlike her opponent, released 15 years of tax returns, and you can see everything we have paid. And that's just the one since I left office. We didn't have any money before that. We've also released 25 years before that. We're almost at 40 years. He ought to do it. It wouldn't hurt too bad. But we've got to do this together. I'm telling you, we cannot go on for 8 more years where more than 90% of the earnings go to 1% of the people. We cannot run an economy that way. Okay. So, who's got a better idea? Hillary does, and don't take my word for it. Senator John McCain's main economic advisor, Mark Zandi, runs a big economic analysis company. Very highly regarded by everybody in the business. He actually analyzed the specific proposals that Hillary made and the specific proposals Mr. Trump made. And he concluded that if her plan passes, we would get at least 10.5 million jobs over and above what would otherwise happen. And if his passed, we'd lose 3.5 million jobs. We cannot afford the 14 million job differences. We got to elect Hillary on Election Day, and we need your help. And look, she's the only person you can vote for. This is something I'm really proud of. After the primary, she and Bernie Sanders got together, and they put both of their college aid plans together and came up with a solution that I think is better than either one of them had before, which is what works when people work together. So here's her proposal. If you go to a public college, a historically black college and university, or any other private college that has a preponderance of middle and lower income students, reasonable tuition, and a high graduation rate, if your income's $125,000 a year or less, you get free tuition. If it's more, if it's more, through work-study money and other opportunities, you get to graduate debt-free. If you're already out and you owe money, her plan says, first, we should stop making college loans the only loans in America you cannot refinance. If every student refinanced their college debt, listen to this, over 20 million of your fellow citizens would save an average of more than $2,000, just refinancing the debt. Then she favors giving everybody a choice. You can pay the debt off if it's fairly modest by doing public service work for 3 years. Or If you can't do that or don't want to do it, or you owe too much money to make it practical, there are people, who owe $100,000 to $200,000 on architecture degrees, law degrees, and medical school and all that. She proposes letting people turn that debt into something that looks like a home mortgage. And just ride with me here a minute. If you got a home mortgage, why can you get a 20 or 30-year home mortgage at a relatively low interest rate? Because it's a lifetime asset, right? And if it's a lifetime asset with lifetime values, you should pay for it over a lifetime. If you had to pay for the loan all up front, not many people would do it. I work in a lot of really poor countries in the world. And one of the biggest problems is they don't have any mortgage systems. So people sometimes build their houses over 15 years, one brick at a time, because nobody can afford to buy a house up front. So we have a mortgage. Now, listen to this. Everybody in this audience under 30 has about a 50% chance of living to be 100. And, better, of living to be 100 without the looming specter of Alzheimer's or other dementia because of advances in human genome discoveries. It's an amazing thing. So, Hillary said, you should be able to pay this debt out over 20 years, never, ever, ever, ever to have to pay more than 10% of your after-tax income in any given month. And if you want to borrow money to start a small business, if you get the loan and you start it, you don't have to pay anything for the first 3 years your business is running until you can get up and get it running. This would revolutionize America. This would put us back in business. Now, this is a big deal. Every year I was your president, we were in the top 5 countries in the world in new business formation. We are not in the top 10 now. And it's because we're not over that crash and because the banks are scared and because they're requiring real estate for collateral. This would fix that. So that's why you ought to vote for her. Second reason you ought to vote for her is there's 2 things that could kill all these good plans. Now, one more thing on economics. I don't want to forget this because I don't want to be accused of dodging it. The other thing you could do to really increase economic growth in America in a hurry is immigration reform. And stop this crazy stuff. So she wants to keep President Obama's programs in place that protect working families and hold them together and let kids go to school, but also not to put anybody ahead of some person who's been waiting to become a naturalized citizen, but give people a path to citizenship and take away this fog of uncertainty. If you did that, would people who commit crimes be immunized from being deported? Absolutely not. No one has ever proposed that. But if you took that uncertainty away, every single independent economic analysis says it would add hundreds of billions of dollars to America's economy over the next few years. We can't afford the $100 billion it costs to send everybody home and build that wall, because we now know from the back and forth in the trip to Mexico, the Mexicans are not going to build it. So, but that's not the point. The point is, these people are making a net positive contribution to our economy. I think it's very interesting that the places in America where the anti-immigration sentiment is strongest are the places where there are the fewest immigrants and where there is no economic problem. They got other problems and they're looking for somebody to blame. Our diversity and our youth, I will say it again, are our biggest asset. Okay, so there are 2 things that can mess this up. Continued political gridlock in Washington and trouble overseas. A weak global economy and turmoil in the Middle East or anywhere else. Conflict with, in Asia over Chinese expansionism or, whatever Russia might do. and are not. And as President Obama said, for this time, Hillary's better qualified to be president than either he or I was at the time we were elected, because she has the standing and the understanding to maximize the chance that we can be safe enough and have space enough to grow our way out of the mess we're in and lead the rest of the world with us before they all want to put up walls. The second thing is, she's the only person you can vote for who has actually gotten things done in the Congress with Democrats and Republicans. Everything she has ever done. Now, I know they've been mean to her. They say mean things. Heck, that's just what they do. The main thing is she won't ever close the door. She'll make it better. I've never seen her touch anything she didn't make better. You could drop her in South Sudan tomorrow, show up in a month, and somehow, some way, things will get better. And that's important. She worked with the House Majority Leader, Tom DeLay from Texas, who was my most bitter opponent in the House, to increase adoptions out of foster care by 80%, because she found out he was an adopted parent. And all of a sudden, he saw himself as an adopted parent, not just a Republican opponent. When she became Secretary of State, in 5 minutes, she said, let's save 3.4 million more lives by buying only generic medicine for kids on AIDS in Africa. You don't know any of those people, but they know you. That's one of the reasons the approval of America went up 20 points while she was Secretary of State. And in spite of all the things they said, if you ever go to her headquarters in Brooklyn, you'll see beautiful laminated pictures of all these prominent Republicans and what they said about her before she was running for president. So you ought to be for her for that reason. And the last reason you ought to be for her, she's the best change maker I've ever seen. Now, this represents a real threat if your argument is government would mess up a two-car parade and only somebody who has dictatorial power can wave a magic wand and fix it. So they made a big deal out of these emails. Let me tell you something. I will not try to disabuse you of that because I'd lose you explaining it. Just remember this. A huge number of prominent Republicans have endorsed her for president. The vast majority of them spent their life in national security trying to protect us all. They have reached the judgment that the national security arguments favor her, don't undermine it. Just remember that. And so I want you to go vote for her because I want you to vote for them yourselves. I want you to vote for a future where we're all in this together. I want you to vote on the fact that we really are stronger together. All over the world, that's what the Brexit vote was about. That's what the vote in the midterm elections in Germany was about. That's what the fight now about how Iraq should be governed is about. That's what the Syrian war is about. Everywhere people are fighting over whether we're better off together or whether it's a winner-take-all bloodbath, and if I don't have it all, to heck with you. Everywhere people are fighting over whether their differences or their common humanity matters more. And I can just tell you, I literally have spent the first half of my life living with the consequences of racial turmoil in the post-World War II South and trying to get over it through education and racial reconciliation and shared governance, and the last half of my life trying to help people in America and around the world make a living, get an education, give their kids a better future. I am telling you, we are the best positioned people in the world for this. But we've got to make the right decision. We are stronger together, and Hillary needs you and North Carolina to make it happen. God bless you.